All right, I'm going to start up. We stopped last time on page 392, overloading operators. We've got about 15 pages to go. So we're going to go through these, do the test review, and then we're going to look at the problem that I gave you a hard copy of. We're actually going to key it all in together. All right? So what they mention here are, you're used to overloading methods. You know how to overload a method. We've talked about this before. Not only can you overload a method, you can overload operators. Typically when you overload operators, what you want them to do is you want to be able, for example, if you overload the plus sign, you want to be able to add two objects together. You can't do that by default. All right? And they talk about that in here. So they show here the overloadable unary operators. Remember what a unary operator is. It's a single. It only has one operand. Like it's the minus sign for like minus 7 for -7. Or if you want to say +7, you can say 7 or +7. Binary operators, that means they have two operands. All right, so in other words, x plus y type of thing. So all these can be overloaded, all these can be overloaded. You cannot overload any of these, and you can't make something do what it's not supposed to do. You literally, if you wanted to, you could overload the minus sign to make it add two things if they were not like regular data types. So if you wanted to add two objects together, you could do it by overloading the minus sign. But why would you do that? Because that would confuse people when they saw minus and you were adding. So even though you can do certain things, doesn't mean necessarily that you should do them. But there are a lot of jerks out there that do stuff like that anyway. All right. As it says, when a binary operator is overloaded, the corresponding assignment operator is overloaded also. So if you overload the plus sign, the plus equal is automatically overloaded. And if you overload the double equal sign, then for equality, then the not equals must be overloaded. If you overload the greater than sign, you must also overload the less than sign. All right? And they even say, don't even worry about that much about overloading and more until more into the next chapter, because they'll talk about it more then. So this is what they do for this example. It says, suppose you create a book class where each object has a title, a number of pages, and a price. Further, it says, assume that a publisher has decided to add books together. So you want to add two books and have them become one. All right? So the new book, the ones that you're adding together, will be a combination of the two titles. They use Silas Mariner and Moby Dick. So the new title would be Silas Mariner and Moby Dick. All right? The number of pages adds up the pages in the two books. And as it says, instead of charging twice as much for the new book, they charge the more expensive book plus $10. You may or may not have seen this. I've seen this before. You go to Walmart, and they'll on a DVD, they'll put 3 movies, and they may be related, they may not be related. You know, when I was a younger kid, my brother used to always drag me over to Steven Seagal movies. You know, and you can maybe see like the best of Steve. I don't know if there is such a thing, but the best of Steven Seagal type of things, where they would combine 3 of his movies together on one DVD. That's the kind of idea that they're talking about right here. Don't know what that is. So this is it right here. But the idea is what they want to be able to do is, as they show right here, is add these two, add the pages together, add the titles together. So notice how they do this. Operator plus. That means they're overloading the plus sign for this. That's how you have to do it. And this is probably as hard as it gets in this class, is this stuff right here. This is something that isn't normally done by beginning programmers because it's hard. All right? But it's something that as you go on and you progress through your programming career, you'll see it. All right? I wouldn't put anything like that on a test, though. So they show then once you've overloaded it, now You're able to add that stuff together. And that's going to, make the new title Silas Marner and Moby Dick. All right, it's going to make the number of pages 350 plus 250, which is 600. It's going to take the cost. It's going to choose the more expensive of the two, which is 16. Add 10 to it, which gives you 26. That make sense? All right. Hopefully, what's happening in there, as far as the beginning of it, just getting into it makes a little bit of sense to you. All right. So they talk about that in here, and they give you some examples. Here's an example. It says, in this example, the minus sign is understood to cause unary negation instead of binary subtraction. So in other words, it's making something negative. That's what they're doing here. Okay? You may or may not have seen something like this before. This is the equivalent of what's typically called a switch or a flag. It's taking something that's negative and making it positive, or taking something positive and making it negative. It's kind of like using the not operator that we've talked about before. Not true is false, not false is true. That kind of an idea. I don't know why I've got that. But it's here. All right. What we're going to do after we get done lecturing on this chapter and going through the course review, again, is we're going to go through this program. We're going to write this today, even if it takes most of the period. Part of your assignment for this chapter is going to be not only to get to type this in and get it to work, but what I've done in here is I've created 6 different person objects. Okay, but I've created them as separate objects. I'm going to want you to take this program, and instead of having 6 separate objects, I'm going to want you to create an array of objects. There's not a lot of work that you're going to have to do in order to do that, but it'll get you in the mindset to work with arrays of objects. All right? Because again, if I go to work, or if I'm doing some work for a company and that company has 10,000 employees, I don't want to be doing employee 1, employee 2, employee 3, 10,000 times. That would just be dumb. But if I can create an array that has 10,000 objects, it'll be a much better way of doing things. It'll make it much easier for me. So in here, they talk about, starting on 397, how to create an array of objects. So notice, this is a class. It's an employee class. So you're making an array of an employee class objects. It's called emp array, and in this case, there will be 7. So it'll be employee 0, employee 1, employee 2, all the way through employee 6. That should make sense to you. All right, very similar to the stuff we talked about with arrays earlier. There, thank you. All right, they even mention that if you want to, you can use sort and you can use binary search with arrays of objects. Again, a little bit more complex a topic. Okay? You're going to do it pretty much the same way that you've done it before, except, again, now you're doing it on an array of objects, all right, as opposed to like an array of ints or something that we've done earlier. Okay. Now, the next thing they talk about here is override. If you remember, I gave you an example the other day where we had, so if we come up here and we create a class called animal, all right, and then we've got down here dog and cat and bird. I think that's the one we used. And for animal, we say that all animals have a name, okay, and all animals can speak. Well, I think, again, I think you'd agree that dogs speak different than cats, that speak different than birds. All right, if I define for an animal, if I define a speak method, then I go back and redefine it down here. It's got to have, unlike what we saw before with overloading, it must have the exact same method signature. So if this says public void speak, then if I redefine it down here, it has to again be public void speak. All right, but I might redefine it to be woof, where this gets be defined to be meow, and this gets be defined to be tweet or whatever. You get the idea. But if I'm redefining those, I'm doing what's called overriding. We've talked about overloading. This is overriding. So when you have overriding, what that means is a child class basically redefines something that it got from a parent class. All right? And I've used this example before, and it's not a great example, but it's the one I'm going to use anyway. That, again, a guy with a big nose marries a woman with a big nose, and they have a kid. Usually the kid will have a big nose. And it's not like the kid can just sit there and say, well, I don't like this nose, take off the one they have and put on another one. That's basically what you're doing here. You're saying, I don't like what you gave me, so I'm going to redo it. All right? And that's what overriding is. That will be on the test. So will a bunch of the stuff that's in here. One of the questions on the test is, what is the I-comparable interface? As it says, it returns the definition of the compare to method, and the compare to method is on the test. It compares one method to another method. Okay? So imagine here that I was comparing two methods. Okay? And let's just say it's method 1 and method 2. I don't care what they are. I don't care what they do. But I want to compare these two. If method 1 is equal to method 2, in other words, they're the same thing, then this compare to thing returns 0. All right? If method 1 is less than method 2, it returns -1. If method 1 is greater than method 2, it returns a +1. That's all you have to be worried about for right now. You'll see this a lot of different, when you do a lot of string comparisons, it works with compare to. All right? To see if two things are equal, one is greater than the other or one is less than the other. Again, negative. Really what's supposed to happen is it's supposed to return, like I told you, -1, 0, or +1. It's possible that they could return a value other than -1. It could be another negative value. Other than +1, it could be another positive value. It doesn't usually happen, but it can. They show that in here also. Again, I'm not going to go through it in any more depth or breadth of coverage than that. Again, they have another you do it here to end the chapter. We're just about through with this. It says in the next step, you create an array of student objects. You prompt the user for data to fill the array, then you sort the array by student ID number. You may want to take a look at this program. All right? And the last thing that's discussed in the chapter, I believe it's the last thing, is they talk about destructors. When you create an object, it's called instantiation. What did we talk about yesterday? When you create an object, what method is called? Anybody remember? Constructor. The destructor is just the opposite. The destructor is called when the object dies. It ends its existence, whatever. The weird thing about it, a destructor is it starts with a tilde. So there is an example of a destructor right there. All right? And I want to mention too, if you look at this, it looks a little weird. But it's kind of like HTML tags. Remember with an HTML tag, if I was going to both bold and italicize, that I should end my bold first. I'm sorry, my italicize first, then end my bold. Everybody remember that from last semester? You were here last semester? This is saying the same thing. This says that the first object created is the last one to die. Just like those two go together, in the same way, those two go together. And just like these two go together, these two go together. All right? And it's a pecking order, for lack of better words. That's just the way it works. Understanding GUI application objects, all it says is they have you drag a button out, and then they tell you, they say, hey, guess what? You've been working with these ever since day one. And if you see this where it says button right there, all right, that's the button class. That's what they're telling you. Again, as I mentioned to you the other day, you have been using classes throughout the entire semester, whether you realize it or not. And I believe that's it for that's it for the chapter. So why don't you open up your test review, if you can, for Chapter 9, and we'll go over that right away. Pull that up. You should have the, I emailed these to you the other day, so you should have the test reviews for both study guides for both Chapter 9 and Chapter 10. So question number 1, the answer to both parts is constructor. So a constructor is automatically called when you create or instantiate an object. If you don't provide your own constructor, one gets created for you. Plus, as you're going to see when we go over the example in just a couple minutes, you can override a constructor. You're going to do that. So again, number 1, both those underlined things are constructor. Number 2, only non-static methods receive a this reference. What does that mean? You know how you put static in front of the names of a lot of your methods so far? If you put static in front of it, you can't use the this reference. Only stuff that doesn't have static in front of it can use this. So, I mean, if you want to be really specific here, we could have even said only non-static methods. All right. So that's number 2. Number 3, you cannot overload an operator for a built-in data type. That's what I just mentioned to you. Again, you can't make the plus sign between 2 integers. You can't do this. You can't overwrite plus, so you've got int x equal 10, int y equals 7, int z equals x plus y. You can't overload this so you get back 3. If you're going to add 2 integers, the plus sign means add them. That's all it means. All right? So we didn't go over this, but I want you to realize something because it sort of is on the test, but I want you to understand this. If I do this, all right, there, that plus sign means addition. Now, you wouldn't normally do this, but if I say, all right, that means, that plus sign there means positive. And we've also done things like this where we've said right line, hello, plus world. That plus sign means concatenation. That's an example right there of how, by default, the plus sign is an overloaded operator. It can do 3 different things depending on the context in which you're using it. That's truly what an overloaded operator is. All right? So number 3 is cannot. Number 4, does not. An array of objects does not hold the actual value. No, it holds the address of the first value. So again, number 4 does not. Number 5, A GUI object such as a text box is not represented as an object that cannot encapsulate other methods. The number 5 is not. Number 6, the data components of a class that differ for each object are stored in instance variables. Instance variables are also known as fields. The instance variables set the contents of the object's state. Number 7, a class that instantiates objects is known as a class client or a class user. Client or user. They mean the same thing. They can be and are used interchangeably. So again, number 7, client or user. Number 8 is a bigger question, because I put a bunch of junk in there. These are all different questions that are on the test. So you have to know public, you have to know private, you have to know protected, you have to know internal. This is about 10% of your test, if not more. Maybe even closer to 20%, right there. I think these are multiple choice, and one or more of them are also in the definition at the end. So let's take a quick look at it just before we go on. Public means unlimited access. Does that make sense? Anyone in the class can use it, any other class can use it. Private means limited access. Public and private are opposites of one another. So private means limited only to the class in which it belongs. Internal, when you think internal, think assembly. Internal assembly. If you get that, you'll be okay for the test. Protected, this will become more evident in the next chapter, but the example I gave you before, where we said we had the animal and then we had the dog and the cat and the bird. If I define something up an animal and I define it as protected, I can change it there, or I can change it in any of the children. All right. Number 9, using private fields within classes is an example of information hiding. And again, no, this is not on the test, but all of you now should understand the difference between this and this. We've talked about this before. And the interface, I gave you the example where I brought up the Windows calculator. And I said what you see on your screen with all the buttons and everything else, that's the interface. If I type in a number and I hit the square root key, that's the implementation, is what gives me the answer. The interface is what you show to the public. The implementation is why you get paid to be a programmer, because it's what happens under the hood to make the interface do what it's supposed to do, look like it's supposed to look, act like it's supposed to act, etc. That wasn't yours. All right, number 10, predefined types are also known as value types. So number 10 is value. Number 11, again, a bigger question because I put a bunch of junk in there. What are accessors? What are mutators? What are implicit parameters? What is the this reference? What is the constructor and initializer? So that's all of them. I'll leave it up there. Whoops. I'll leave it up there for a minute, and that should have a space there. And I'll give you a hint. They do ask you what an accessor is. There is nothing on the test that I remember for a mutator, but I put it up there because I want you to understand the difference that an accessor and a mutator are opposites of one another. All right, accessors access information, but they're read-only, they can't change it. Mutators are write-only, they can change it. And the good news for you, maybe you don't consider it good news, is you're going to have a chance to write accessors and mutators in just a couple minutes. Leave it up there for about one more minute, and I want to move on then. All right. What we just went over here. Look again a little bit longer. I'll leave it up there for a minute. Let me get rid of this. Ignore once. Ignore once. I think that's it for that question. Yes, it is. Right now, what I'm thinking is, after we get done with this, we're going to take a break. After the break, we're going to key in this program that you have that I gave you the hard copy of. All right? There is no class Monday. Please remember that. All right? It's President's Day. Tuesday, we're going to go over another example. Okay? And then Wednesday, I'm going to give you the rest of the period Tuesday to work on this stuff. Wednesday is going to be the written test, the one that we're doing the review for right now. After we do the written test on Wednesday, then the rest of the period on Wednesday, we're going to go over Chapter 10. All right. We will take the test, the hands-on test for 9 and 10 sometime during the week of February 27th. I don't know when. Leave that up there for about 1 more minute. I want to get done with this, and I want to give you time to take a break before we start keying in this program that you have in front of you. When we key in the program that's in front of you, if you have a problem, just try to go on because you have the code. Some of you have emailed me, you're having problems. It's like, Jeff, I'm keying in the code. I'm keying in exactly what you have, and mine looks exactly the same, and mine doesn't work, and yours does. Why is that? Because it's not the same. I'm sorry, it's not. You could have a word spelled wrong. You could have a case that's done wrong. It could be all sorts of things. But that's just, I mean, that's the way it is. Okay? All right. Again, kind of long. What's a destructor? How does it differ from a constructor? Get rid of this. It's way too big. So, destructor, destroy, constructor, create. Okay? Again, I can tell you that this very well might be in more than one question. Okay? All right, number 14. Again, a little bit longer. When we get done with that, all that's left is this one with all the definitions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this up here for 2 or 3 minutes, then I'm going to leave the definitions up there, and at 5 after 9, I'm going to start back up again. All right, so it depends on how fast you type. I'll leave this up there till about 8:47, and then I'll leave the other one up there until the end of the break. Okay. Again, some books, rather than saying an object is an instantiation of a class, they say an object is an instance of a class, because that's what instantiation is. It's creating an instance. You're going to see a lot of this stuff in action when we go through the example today. All right, and finally the last one has got all the definitions. Now just hold on a second, I'm going to make this smaller so they all fit. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Hopefully that's big enough that you can, is that big enough you can still read it okay? I like doing that because then you can see all 9 of them. It is 8:47. In 18 minutes, I will start up where we're going to key this in. So please try to get a break in on at that time. I'm going to do the same. I'm not going to remove this, but I want to just stop taping, so let me just pause that.